The biggest mistake I made in my business was not hiring a professional to help me with my money. Not just my taxes, but the actual plan I had for my business. I was completely lost on how to handle taxes, what to do with profit, and how to maintain my income. I had to find a better way. That's when I found Core Financial. Core Financial is a team of tax professionals that actually care about building real relationships with their clients. They run my books, keep me up to date with my finances, and make sure I'm taking full advantage of all of my tax benefits. Are you struggling with your finances? Look no further. Core Financial is a brand that is nationwide that can help you with your business. Both Nick and I are huge fans of Core, and they can help you too. Check out howtofilmweddings.com/core to schedule a consultation today. Core Financial, real relationships, no surprises. Hello and welcome to How to Film Weddings. My name is John Bunn, and I'm joined today, this brand new, beautiful, cold week, by Mr. Nick Miller. Nick, how are you, my good buddy?
Well, I am better after that conversation we just had. So if you don't know this, we record our intros and outros like after we already have our conversation, so we know what to talk about. And you guys, you are in for a treat with Sam Jacobson, who we just had on our podcast today. He is a sales guru.
We could say that.
I don't know if he calls himself that. I will call him that. Specifically for the wedding and event industry. So he knows our industry. He knows, guys, he dropped some big nuggets. Not little nuggets. Big ones in this episode.
It's good stuff.
John and I took a bunch of notes on our computers while we were listening to him talk. You are definitely going to want to do that. So, John, I'm going to say let's just jump in.
Let's go. All right, well, we're really excited to welcome Sam Jacobson to the How to Film Weddings podcast. Sam, thank you so much for being on, and just introduce yourself to the How to Film Weddings crew. Say hello. Who are you, and what are you doing on our podcast?
Yeah. Thank you so much for bringing me in here. My name is Sam Jacobson. I am a sales and pricing expert for wedding professionals. I've been working in the wedding industry since 2006 and have spent all that time trying to figure out how can I book more couples and how can I help other wedding professionals book more couples. I think that you'll find throughout this conversation that I take a pretty science-backed approach. I think that there's a lot of power in knowing how humans make decisions and then designing a sales process around how that works. So I've spent a ton of time over the last 15 years reading and learning about that, and then honing that through the thousands of inquiries and the hundreds of couples and millions of dollars that I've sold directly. And now I have a consulting company. We do one-to-one coaching. We do in-person workshops when you can gather with more than 6 people in 2 households. And we also do online education. And our team does copywriting for websites and for sales proposals and for cornerstone content.
I love it. And I came across you. I remember Ashley, one of our moderators of our Facebook group, was like, have you guys heard of this Sam Jacobson guy? And I was like, no, who's that? And she started, that same day I started getting pinged on Clubhouse, like, you should join this conversation. You should join this conversation. And I would be like making eggs one morning, and it was like this dude with this devilishly handsome voice would come on and be like talking about things. And I'm just like, man, this is so good. This is such good information. And then I'd get pinged again. And I was like, I'm just going to see if this guy would be interested in talking to the How to Film Weddings group. So if you don't follow Sam on Clubhouse, he is dropping some knowledge over there. But I wanted to ask you, you said it a little bit, but I'd love to know a little more of the backstory of how you've got to where you are now. You said you've done millions of dollars of sales for people. Like, what's the backstory? How'd you get to where we're at today?
Yeah, it's kind of an unorthodox story. I did not get into weddings because I grew up wanting to plan weddings or doing anything really with weddings. I had a restaurant background. It was one of my first jobs in school when I was in high school. Actually, I could get a car. I worked at the local hotel and I did room service and bus tables. And that then turned into working at the Olive Garden when I was in college. and love that job enough to stick with it for about 3 years. And then when I was done with college, I got a gig serving tables again at the local resort on an island where my parents had moved while I was in school. And I ended up spending a couple of years kind of traveling around the world. I went back to graduate school for a little while. I thought I wanted to be a teacher, a professor of medieval history was what I really wanted to do. I know, kind of random.
More on that later. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'll tell you about the riveting 3 months I spent teaching myself Latin. It's and I found out that I really just wanted to continue to help people in hospitality. And so I went back to the resort that I worked at in 2001 and started managing and instead of waiting tables. And I really loved training people, and I loved the work that I was doing with a team. And so I did that for a few years. And then in the spring of 06, the GM of the resort came over one day and said, "Hey, Sam, guess what? The event manager quit, and we have nobody who can come close to doing the job for the immediate future. That's your new position." And I said, "Okay, I'll do it. I love new things, challenges." And I said, "When do I start?" He said, "Right now. You have a meeting with a client in 30 minutes. And I had never even attended a wedding. And so I had no idea what to do. I went over and checked out Emily Post's wedding etiquette and figured out how to run a ceremony rehearsal. I got through that day, and I got through the whole summer and never looked back. So I've got a background in operations. I was doing lodging at the same time I was doing event work, but that started 8 years of doing direct sales work with couples. And then after I kind of felt like I had topped out there at the resort and it was time for me to move on, I got an invite from Todd Fiskus with Todd Events out of Texas, luxury planner, design, decor, floral. And he picked me up. I moved across the country and showed up to Dallas with 2 suitcases and a carry-on, and was there for eventually 2 years as his number 2, running the day-to-day operations. And eventually I moved into the role that I'm in right now.
Wow, you've got quite the story. I'm not sure how many of us. I mean, it's kind of similar to a lot of us. They're like, people are like, how'd you get in filming weddings? Well, my friend was, getting married, and they knew I had a camera, so here I am, and I'm here today. And you're like, well, I'm working at this resort, and well, here I am, just showing up to do that. So obviously over the last, you said since 2006. So that was right. So the last 15 years or so, you've obviously adapted and grown, and your passions, have shifted a little bit and all that kind of stuff. So what would you say, now you spend a majority of your time like really talking about whenever it comes to your profession? How are you really helping people?
Yeah, I think what I can do is cut through the noise of all of the information that's out there about how to book more couples. One of the things that I see quite a bit, and this is not a knock on anybody, is that there's usually general advice offered from a particular set of skills that and experience that an individual has. So much of the education in the wedding world is brought to us by people who have experience with their own business. And sometimes they've never sold for anybody else's business at all. And so one of the things that I think that what we do is we take all of the best information from outside of our own business and our own experience and offer people an opportunity to see what works in businesses other than our own. And that I think has been really helpful. It's not just me, it's my wife and business partner, Katie. She sold for 22 years, 14 of those as a director of catering for 4 seasons in Dallas, Texas. And so, we've got combined a ton of experience in a ton of different areas, and that allows us to provide a lot of different perspectives, more than just our own.
Yeah, and it's interesting, listening to you on Clubhouse specifically, you've been just destroying over there, like so many good pieces of information. And it's like, you can tell the difference between somebody that has done it and somebody that is just trying to teach people how to do it. And there's a big difference. And like just the knowledge that you're dropping, especially on the side of like the client experience, the whole booking process. I think as wedding filmmakers, a lot of us really suck at this. And whenever I started hearing you talk, I was taking notes and it was just like, we have to get this guy on our podcast. And so I wanted to kind of shift the conversation to the client experience, especially the sales portion. We kind of suck as wedding filmmakers. I think we don't take, an approach that is, the entire brand. And so I just would love for you to kind of talk about some of the things that you're seeing with the sales experience, or dropping any kind of wisdom when it comes to what we should be thinking about with our sales.
Yeah, most wedding professionals are not so bueno when it comes to doing sales work. And that's okay, because your clients, couples, aren't hiring you to be good at sales or great at marketing. It's a necessary part to connect with them, obviously. But, as a filmmaker, they want you to be amazing at making the film and telling the story of their wedding day. And you probably are, anybody who's listening to this, and Nick and John, both of you are, but nobody's going to be able to experience that service if you can't convince them that you're the best fit for their needs. And so while we may not like it or be good at it, we still have to do it as filmmakers. And so knowing that we have to do it, we probably want to get good at it. And the best way really to do that is to recognize that it's not about us, it's about our clients. And, one of the things that we always want to keep in mind is that our business exists to provide solutions to the problems that our couples have. And so if we want to sell more of our services, if we want to, create more of an option for us to be a part of more weddings, then we have to start with the needs, the wants, the desires, the concerns, the issues that our clients are experiencing. And so everything that I talk about and everything that I teach and train to, it always begins with the buyer in mind, because that's why we have a business. And so getting to know that buyer and what motivates them, what scares them, what keeps them up at night, what excites them. When you know those things, then you're connecting with them in ways that are far more important than any good film ever could.
Yeah. Man, that's really, really good thought. So the thing that, in our mastermind, actually last night, a couple nights ago, we kind of talked about identifying, who your ideal client is. And, to really, I was in business for 4 years before I really started educating myself and learning. And I see no coincidence that in the last 2 or 3 years, our business is Wild Oak Films has really taken off because I have invested, to learn more and that sort of stuff. So, you're talking about, the buyer, the consumer, figuring out their wants, their desires, their needs, that sort of stuff. What do you say to someone that has maybe never gone through that process, maybe have never thought about those kind of things? How would you what are a few pointers to help them start identifying that person so that they can start meeting those needs?
Yeah, that's a great question. And even if you haven't, even if you've spent some time doing this, a lot of people that we run into that have gone through and assured us that they know who their perfect buyer avatar is or their ideal client, they've just scratched the surface. So when we're looking at our perfect buyer, we're looking at really 3 different layers. The first layer, the surface layer, is the demographics. Where do they live? What kind of work do they do? How much money do they make? Do they live with each other? The surface level things that maybe the U.S. Census Bureau might know about them. And then we go to the second level, which is the ethographics. And these are the values and concerns and beliefs that the buyer has. So what are the values and belief systems that they're operating off of? And then once we get there, we want to go down one more layer. We want to excavate a little bit further down, and we want to hit the psychographics. And the psychographics are going to be about the emotional triggers, both good and bad, that the buyer has. Basically, what state of mind are they in when they're looking at making a purchase decision? What motivates them and what holds them back? And so when we go through and we do this kind of brand excavation, deep dive into your perfect buyer, the best way to do that is to ask very specific questions that get to this information. And so, if you are just starting out, or even if you've done this for a decade, what we would recommend doing is going through after you book your client, not waiting until the end after you've delivered the film, after the wedding's over, but right after you book your client, when they're at their, the moment of, we call it the moment of highest pleasure, which is when they're most excited about working with you. You ask them questions, and questions are something along the lines of, when you were looking for a filmmaker or videographer, what was most important to you? When you were looking for a filmmaker or videographer, what were some of your biggest concerns that you had about hiring one? Another one is, what are some of the challenges you ran into in picking one videographer or one filmmaker from all of the others? A great question to ask in this little questionnaire or feedback form is something along the lines of, just when you were about ready to commit to booking me, what was the one thing that was holding you back? And that's going to be like their biggest fear, their biggest concern, and it's the biggest objection ultimately that you're going to have to overcome. And there are a handful of other questions, but it's questions like these that you're going to ask that are going to get at those psychographics. And when you know what it is that triggers, good and bad, your best buyers, you'll be able to then put out content messages that address those in social media, on your website, during the discovery calls, on your sales proposals, when they overcome, when they come to you with objections and you have to overcome them, and so many other areas. So you're really doing market research in just a few simple questions.
Man,
I'm chomping at the bit, but I'm gonna let Nick go because I have a lot to say.
Yeah, John always does the talking here, but it just made me sorry. It just made me think that I would never think to send my clients like a questionnaire like that. You've booked me, and I would never think to use them to help me figure out, why it is that they booked me. When I've done this exercise before, my wife and I are like, okay, they shop at Target and they say thank you, like that sort of thing. But there's nothing, the saying thank you thing that I can tell, but the shopping at Target thing, like that doesn't, okay, that's cool, but what does that really mean? What does that matter? And so anyway, I was just saying that's great stuff. Okay, John, you can probably say something way more profound.
No. So if you notice, if you're watching on YouTube, which I recommend you do because you can see how great we look today, but me and Nick are both like typing notes the whole time. Like we have this note sheet that we talk back and forth kind of during podcasts, and it's usually a lot of questions, but we've just inserted all of our notes already from what we've been. So this is so good. So I want to get practical and unpack this. You're talking about the third level, these psychographics, the ethographics, asking it at the point of pleasure, the point of purchase, like the highest point of, and you're doing this. Why? Like, for me, whenever I book somebody, like I'm so excited to start asking these, but the main reason people don't book me at this point is the budget. That's what they say. And that's what we hear all the time is they didn't budget for us. Video is looked at kind of down at the end. And, I would love to hear your thoughts on how to use these psychographics going back to people. So by the time they get to buying, that the budget isn't the main concern. Like what would you, if I were your client, you were helping me get to that point, what steps would you lay out for me to get people to a point to when I'm ready for them to buy, they're willing to pay more?
Yeah. Well, boy, there you go. This is the rest of the podcast, boys. Let's do this. So a couple of things here. And before I get going too, you feel free to edit this out if you don't want it in the final one. But we actually
don't edit.
You don't edit. You're like, no, it's good. It's how to film, not how to edit weddings, Sam.
There you go.
So we just did a live training on social proof, specifically on this, like half an hour ago. So I would refer people, if they want to replay, you can go into Facebook, and in our Facebook group, which is free to join, Sell Weddings Like a Pro. So you can go through there and check out the social proof workshop that we did on February 11th. And you'll get the whole hour and a half long. And we actually dig into a lot of this. But I'll give you the quick view, and then I want to dive into things we did not talk about in the live training. So one of the reasons why you want to ask this right after the booking is because when people sign up to work with you, right after they give you a deposit and sign the contract, that when they've committed, that's when they are most excited about working with you. So they are fully relieved. They have completed their buyer's journey. They have, they've returned with the magic elixir, from their trials and tribulations and their crisis and, the deepest, darkest cave they've been in. They finally pulled through and they picked their videographer, their filmmaker, and boom, they are super thrilled about it. And so now they want to celebrate, and you're going to catch them in an amazing mood. Now, this is important because you're going to get really great feedback, number one. Number two, it had just happened. So what was going through their mind has not been transformed over time. And if you wait 6 months, 9 months, 15 months, they're not going to remember what was most important or what was most challenging or what was going through their head right before they decided to commit. There's also some other things here that are really important, not the least of which is that when people make decisions, we're making decisions with two different parts of our mind. Our ways of thinking are going to be broken down into the system one thinking, which is autopilot, emotional, effortless, just we don't even think, we just do it. And then the system two way of thinking is the logical, rational, deliberate way of thinking. And when we make decisions like for wedding vendors, including videography, cinematography, what's happening is that we're likely making a lot of the decision with our system one autopilot way of thinking. And so when somebody asks us why we did something or why we made that choice, we don't actually really know. And so we do what's called a post-event or a post-rationalization of why we made that choice. And that then becomes the reason that we remember. So if you ask these questions in this order, then what you're doing is you're actually helping very subtly to create a memory of why they chose you. And that memory then is now imprinted for them to repeat and share very easily with other people. So when somebody says, hey, why did you choose John? Or why did you choose Nick? Or why did you choose Sam? Now that you're helping them articulate the real reason that they chose you, because before they probably couldn't come up with something other than, I really liked them, or their film work was beautiful, or it fit into our budget. Now you're really provoking some thoughts on what they went through, and you're bringing them through that journey where they're re-experiencing that, and then they're remembering it, they're articulating it, they're imprinting it, and now they're making it shareable for other people. So this will boost the way that people talk about you while they're working with you, which is way more effective at getting referrals, right? Because what happens when somebody that you know is getting married? All you do is ask, so how's the wedding planning going? and so now every time that a couple gets asked, so how's the wedding planning going? Hopefully they'll say, oh my gosh, my videographer is amazing. They made me feel like this. And they're going to share that much more easily because they can remember why they chose you in the first place.
Man, and that's such a, whenever you're giving a referral in person, like, oh, John's films are just incredible or whatever, that's a really good thing to say about him. But, there's that deeper, whenever we talked and he made me laugh and he made me feel like I was the most important client, or, that sort of like an actual response, that's a way better sales tactic than, oh, just his work is incredible. I love that, man. Just such great stuff, Sam. I can see why you're, why people listen to you and why people want to learn from you and all of that kind of stuff and hire you. So this is a great conversation. I know, Sam, you had some other stuff that you wanted to share with us that you didn't share with your, little webinar thing that you did. And we're going to get to that right after this break. What would you take on if you had an extra set of hands? What would you do with your free time if you didn't have to edit? So many of us get bogged down in the post-production hustle that we never seem time to focus on our business. John and I both felt that way. until we found Wedditor. Wedditor is a post-production team of top wedding film editors and project managers that give your films and brand the extra eyes, ears, and hands that they need. Not only is Wedditor delivering films we love to our couples faster, but we can invest ourselves fully in other areas of our business knowing that Wedditor has our back. Be the first to know how your second shooters are doing, how those new LUTs work with your footage, and relax knowing your couples are getting the full attention they deserve on every single project. So what could you do with an extra hand? Head over to howtofilmweddings.com/Wedditor, whether you're ready to start now or preparing for next season. Be sure to use promo code HTFW for $50 off your first project. If you're interested in this service, make sure you head over to howtofilmweddings.com/Wedditor soon. Fall 2020 spots are lined up and filling up fast. Wedditor, more than freelance, more than outsourcing.
Finding the perfect song for your wedding film can be so frustrating. We spend countless hours searching for the perfect song. When it comes to licensing music, Nick and I both love MusicBed. Not only do they have the best music, but their website makes it so easy to find the perfect song and to find it fast. We have both been using the MusicBed's wedding subscription for years and cannot recommend it enough. Not only are they adding new music from incredible musicians like Chapters, The Light, The Heat, and Tony Anderson all the time, they've made it incredibly easy to search their library for mood, genre, instrumentation, and even key. So what are you waiting for? Head on over to howtofilmweddings.com/musicbed and use promo code HTFW for a free month of a MusicBed wedding subscription. howtofilmweddings.com/musicbed.
All right, and we are back from break with John, as always, and Sam, thank you so much for being here. We're going to go ahead and jump into our question of the day presented by Wedditor. Wedditor, more than freelance, more than outsourcing. If you have a backlog, you need to check out Wedditor. They are amazing. So Sam, you've just dumped a lot of great information about kind of just like follow-up questions and how that can be impactful, to both the client and yourself and your business. So what's the next step? Like what's the next thing that you need to do, after you maybe start implementing something like that?
So when you get that kind of information from people, it's incredibly valuable because, again, we exist as businesses to provide services to the needs of our clients. So when we know the surface level needs and the psychological needs, we can then start shaping the messaging of what we do for our clients around what we know is going to hook and trigger them in good ways. So, let's talk a little bit about price, because I know everybody always wants to talk about price, which is fine. I mean, I kind of put my flag on the ground 4 years ago and said, I'm going to be known for pricing. And here's why, because everybody wants to talk about it, but nobody wants to really dig into what goes into charging more. They think that, I can just charge more by putting, a certain dollar amount, or maybe if I get a referral from a planner or a venue, or maybe if I offer more, I can charge more. But there's real work that has to go into creating more of a desire for your services. And so if you want to charge more, you have to provide more value. If you want to provide more value, you have to do more. And if you want to do more, you have to show your couples that they need more. And so instead of taking the surface level answer to what are you looking for in a videographer, and the couple says, we need like 2 to 3 minutes, or we're thinking we might want some video to go along with the photo, maybe like some of the toasts and the ceremony with the vows exchanged, and like they come to you with that, your job as a salesperson, putting your salesperson's hat on, not your filmmaker's hat on, is to create significantly more desire for what it is that you do. And when you know what it is that they really want and need, because you've asked your previous clients what it is that they really wanted and needed, then you can hypothesize and guess that that's what these guys want too. They just don't know it yet. And so what we do when somebody inquires is we eventually get them on the phone. That's what we're trying to do, so that we can have what I call a discovery call, or maybe a consultation, or whatever you want to call it. But what we're doing is we're not necessarily just asking them questions about like how they met and what they want in a film and all of that. What we're doing is we're leading them through a process called guided discovery. It's the same thing that I do with my coaching clients, is that I'm guiding them to discover what's most important. What are the highest priorities? What are the real issues and concerns? And so when you talk with a couple on a discovery call and you're guiding them to discover what you already know they really want and they really need from a film that you're going to offer them, then they're going to have an aha moment on that discovery call. And they're going to have what's called a peak experience of insight. They're going to have a moment of self-discovery. Wow, I know what's important to me when it comes to wedding films, and I know what I want, and what I don't want. And so they're going to remember that, and they're going to attach and associate that with you, and they're going to see that if you guided them to discover what they really need, you probably are going to figure out how to guide them to get what they really want. And so that process right there is where you make your money. It's on the discovery call. It is not with how beautiful your films are. That's part of it, but everybody else that they're looking at has really pretty films too. And what you're really doing here is you're trying to get them to have a heightened awareness of what their needs are, and then associate you with the person who can fulfill those.
Yes. Okay, the end. No, I'm just kidding. So I wrote down pretty much everything you said. Yes, he's dropping his mic. Nick is watching me basically.
Yeah, I was just watching the type as it came up on my screen.
You said something, and I think this is, I want to unpack a lot of what you just said here, but you said create significantly more desire. And I think a lot of people, especially us wedding filmmaker guys and gals that are behind a camera, don't really want to we don't want to put our marketing hat on or our sales hat on. We don't feel genuine if we're selling ourselves. How do we create, I know you take those questions, but how do we create that desire? What things should we really be pulling on? Should it be our branding? Should it just be the way we're talking to them on this discovery call? What would you say to the listeners out there that don't know how to create more desire in their business?
So we can do it any number of different ways. I think that the discovery call is going to be that moment where you're going to go through and you're going to ask some questions. Typically, the questions will go in order like this: a general questions to warm up, just to build enough rapport and trust so that they open up and feel vulnerable. They need to feel comfortable, and then you're going to ask them questions about things that they don't want or don't like. And so, this is, tried and true copywriting tactic, right? Problem, agitate, solve. You got to talk about the problems. You got to agitate those problems, and then you can jump in with the solution. And so when you're on that discovery call, you're going to start off with the problems that people are running into, because they can identify what's not working. Most people can't identify what they want or how to fix it, but they can identify what's not working. It's like you go into the doctor, right? And you're like, hey, doc, I got this rash and I'm running a bit of a fever and I got a cough that won't go away. And the doctor's job is to go, oh, okay, I get that. I recognize that. Let me ask some more questions. And then the doctor eventually prescribes something for you. Now, when your couples come to you, they don't know how to present their symptoms. So you've got to draw it out of them. Once you draw it out of them, once you draw out what they're running into that are problems, then you can kind of hypothesize and guess and even suggest what it is that is most important to them. Okay. So first we talk about what people don't like or don't want, because they're going to then identify in themselves what it is that they really do want. That, whether it's what's something that's the opposite of what they don't want, or maybe that they saw somewhere else that they want. And by going through this process, you're now creating desire to make the problems go away, and desire to have their needs fulfilled. And once you reach that, then you want to move into the next stage of the discovery call, which is the reframe. And this is where you reframe their understanding of what it is you do as a filmmaker, videographer, cinematographer to meet those needs. And this is where you get to show your expertise and your authority by letting them know, hey, essentially, you may think you know what it is that people like us do, but boy, oh boy, I have some surprising insights that are going to really blow your mind and get you to recognize how much more we do than what your Uncle Doug would do with his iPhone sitting in the audience.
Freaking Doug.
Doug, I'm telling you, man, Uncle Doug, Aunt Betty, and their iPhone 12 Pros are not going to be able to do what it is that I do, because as all videographers know, all cinematographers know, that making a real film is more than just pointing a camera at the action. Yeah. It's telling a story. It's creating a story arc. It's you're spending 2, 3, 4 times as much time editing as you are filming. And so your job in this part of the sales process is to really tell them, hey, you guys think you know what you're doing when it comes to creating a film of your wedding, but you have no clue. Why don't you sit down there, and I'm gonna really open your eyes and help you understand what it is that you never even knew we did.
I want to add something. Yesterday, I was on the call with somebody that has already booked, so it wasn't a discovery call, but she has a healthy budget. In the call, I tried to schedule calls like 6 months from the wedding, 3 months, just to kind of check back in and do a little upselling and just kind of be, helpful and all that. And yesterday I was talking with a bride, and she several times was just saying how she didn't really need us at the rehearsal dinner. They were going to do some speeches, but they didn't. And even after all that I had done using similar process to this, she didn't get the value in what I was doing or what I could do by being at the rehearsal dinner and why those things are so important. So by using this system where, it's like we did warm her up, we talked about things, then we talked about, like things, the agitate side of things. And I'm looking through and I'm like, okay, I did this correct. I did. And it makes sense when she had this aha moment in the middle of our call, when she was like, oh my goodness, I need you at the rehearsal dinner because that's where all the speeches are going to be. And it's $2,000, and so that's a nice upsell. And there's so many things I think with wedding filmmakers in general, where they're just literally so focused on the art and so focused on the cameras and the equipment that they don't realize that if they know the answers to these questions, why people bought with them, and then they're not warming people up in their calls, they're not agitating or figuring out or telling them the problems. Like when you do these things, it really is like, it's so much easier to sell.
It's way easier to sell. And so like here, I'll go through and maybe give an example. And maybe this is something similar to what you did, of how this guided discovery call works, just to kind of really cement it in the listener's mind. So, and I would literally do it in a story like this. It would go something along the lines of this dialogue. I'd be talking with the couple or the bride or the groom or whomever it is, and I would somehow ask them, what are you most interested in? They would tell me, and then if they didn't, let's say they didn't mention that they wanted speeches, because I know a lot of filmmakers don't include speeches necessarily in like the base package, and so what I would recommend, I would recommend in this conversation, I would say, well, tell me about the speeches. Are you guys doing speeches? And she would say, yes. And I would say, oh, okay, great. So walk me through how you are recording those. If I'm not doing that, who's capturing that? And she would say, oh, we're going to have people with like iPhones. And then it would be like, oh, okay, cool. What are you doing for the audio portion of it? Given that they're speeches, is anybody miking them up? Is somebody going to be around with the boom, or how are we doing that? And she would say, I guess we didn't really think about that. We just figured that like they could take a video on the phone. And somehow you would create enough need for that. Right now, again, we're trying to sell not just the speeches, but we're trying to sell the rehearsal dinner as well. So how do we get that 2K from the rehearsal dinner? Later on in the conversation, you're like, well, let me tell you this really crazy story about rehearsal dinners. I showed up at my own, and this is a true story, listeners, by the way. I showed up at my own rehearsal dinner, and my dad was in like a flop sweat. And I asked him what's going on. And he said, I found out 10 minutes before we left, when I was just starting to get dressed, that the groom's parents give speeches at the rehearsal dinner, not the wedding. And I had not written my rehearsal dinner speech yet, and I was in full panic mode. And so I realized as a groom to be that speeches were not just given at the actual wedding, but they were given the night before. And I'm just guessing that your fiance probably wants to hear his parents' toasts to both of us as well. In addition to that, there are so many other things that are going to go on. And one of the most beautiful parts of the rehearsal dinner, why everybody loves them, is that it's so casual, so relaxed. Everybody's so at ease. And it's a very different experience than what people go through when they're at the wedding day. And so having some film about that part of the experience and about those people who are super at ease and really relaxed, and those emotional connections that are happening for the first time for family and friends who haven't seen each other, and the joking around that occurs is much more natural. And I'm guessing you probably want to capture that too. So somehow you would go through and have a conversation like that, and all of a sudden they're like, well, what about the brunch on Sunday? Can you show up for that too? So you're creating this need by pointing out something that they probably hadn't thought of. You're talking about what they think could be a solution that actually is not a solution, and you're going to agitate that Uncle Doug is going to go through and film the thing. Or that they don't have good sound quality, or that somebody might forget and then it will be lost forever, or whatever it may be, whatever the DIY solution is. And then you're going to talk about how you can swoop in and offer a great solution that's super easy for them. All they have to do is just up their budget by $1,500.
Yeah. And as you're sitting there and you're telling all, these stories about, the agitating and all that sort of stuff, my thought goes, well, where do you come up with these questions? How do you know what to ask and that stuff? But if you have started sending the couples that you've already booked a question, a couple days a week after they book, now the kind of questions that you need to be asking. So it's all playing off of each other. So that's helpful if you didn't pick that up, listener, that's how you are getting these questions so that you can ask them that. So on the discovery call, that's truly what it is. Like, I guess, are you saying, here's my services, I'll send you are we looking at a quote, or is that in your opinion, should it be a different process? How do you go in for the sale, I guess?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think a lot of people don't like doing discovery calls because they feel like they're not good at selling their stuff. And so they're like, I don't want to get on a call. I suck at phone calls, they say. Well, so that's a pretty normal thing. It's funny. So my wife and I, again, business partner Katie, we're recording our new online course, which is coming out here shortly. And we tell the story of the sales process chronologically. And we're like halfway through the main part of the course, and I started joking in the recording in the very beginning of our new lessons. I keep saying, hey babe, are we going to tell them finally how to actually sell their services? We're on lesson 14, and she's like, nope, not yet. And then the next one, it's like, okay, I think we should probably teach them how to sell. Oh no, we got to do one more thing before they actually have to go through and try and make their pitch. And we do this because it's almost funny how long you have to wait in the sales process to actually start selling your services. So only after you've gone through the discovery call and you've sent an email recap, hopefully, and this is probably if you're editing right now and listening to this, stop editing and take a note. One of the most important things you can do is, before you get off the discovery call, pre-schedule a second phone call to review the proposal. Okay. So before you get off the first phone call, you're going to schedule a second phone call before you give them the sales proposal. And you're going to get that on the book so that you have an opportunity to close the deal, because eventually you will want to sell, and you'll also want to have a chance to talk to them about it. So, okay, you can go back to editing now. So you're going to send them the proposal. And in the proposal is when you propose services to meet the needs that they've shared with you on the discovery call. And that's when you go into the different collections and pricing and all of that stuff. So not on the discovery call. On the discovery call, you're helping them feel comfortable, connected, discover what's most important to them, reassure them that you're listening, develop some and demonstrate some expertise and authority, talk a little bit about budget to make sure that it's worth your time and worth their time to keep going with the proposal. Schedule the second phone call, and then you get off the call and write your email recap, and then eventually send out your proposal.
So are you sorry? So in your process, you have this discovery call. At that point, you are letting them know, here's ballpark of price or base price. Are you letting them at least know that sort of information so you're not just wasting everybody's time?
Yeah, well, so yeah, you are. Yes, you are. Is a short answer, but there's also some really cool techniques that you can do that I want to share with everybody here. So, asking you, I don't know, Nick, where's the next place when we get out of this pandemic? Where's the next place you're going to go to?
I don't know. I'm going to
Ireland,
Mexico.
Italy, Mexico.
I'm going to Mexico. Sure.
Okay. Have you been to Mexico before?
Like 7 years ago. It's been a while.
Okay. How much is it going to cost you to go to Mexico?
I don't know.
There you go. That's it.
Yeah.
You're like, I don't know, a few $1,000. And so like if we were to go in your brain and look at the way that your brain fired in there, you're like, I don't know. I'm going to come up with a number. I'm going to make something up. I'm going to base it off of what I spent 7 years ago. How much did I spend? I don't know. A few $1,000 sounds good, right? Like that just happened in that much time period. That's the same thing that happens if you ask your couples, how much money do you want to spend on your wedding film? They're like, I don't know. What do we pay the photographer? How much do we have budgeted? I can't remember. I don't know. I'm so confused now. I have so many things going on. So I wouldn't even really recommend asking them how much they want to pay for something that they have no clue how much it costs. Instead, what I would do is I would ask them, how much do you have budgeted? What range do you have budgeted for the whole wedding? Now, there's a couple of things at play here. Number one, they probably know how much they have budgeted for the whole wedding. Okay. But really what's at play here is that we're using what's called an anchoring technique. Now, the anchoring effect is really, really powerful. And I'd recommend looking up anchoring effect. Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky, they wrote about this back in the 70s and 80s. And Kahneman, after Tversky died of cancer, Kahneman ended up winning the Nobel Prize specifically for his contribution to economics because of this particular principle. And in anchoring, what happens is that when we say a big number, the next number that follows is more likely to be big. If we say a small number, the next number that follows is more likely to be small. And that's because the anchor number acts as almost a magnet where you don't want to go too far from it. You keep getting drawn back to that number. And there's been dozens, hundreds of experiments that have replicated this effect. The specific experiment that Kahneman did is called the United Nations experiment, where people were asked how many countries Africa has in the United Nations. And some people were like primed subtly in conversations with low numbers and they guessed low. Some people were primed with high numbers and they guessed high. There are many other experiments that were done like this. And so why do I recommend using this when it comes to asking people for their budget? Because they're more likely to say a higher number if you start priming them with a higher anchor number, like how much money they're going to spend on their whole wedding. So if you're working with somebody who's got a $50,000 budget and they've got $4,000, say $3,000 earmarked for video, if you ask them, how much are you spending on your wedding? And they say, oh, we're looking at like $45,000, $50,000. Great. How much of that do you have earmarked for video? They are more likely to say a higher number, especially if they haven't really thought about it. So that's one part of it. Another part is they're ready for you to provide some information about how much it should cost. So you could go, you know what, don't even worry about it. Most people don't know. That's why you're talking to me, how much it should cost. Here's what we found is that photo video combined should typically be somewhere in the 10 to 12% range for a wedding like you've told me about. And you know, you could look at somewhere around a third to a half of that going to video. So if you've got 50 grand for your overall budget and we're looking at say 5% for the video, we're looking at, you know, maybe $2,500, $3,000 altogether for video. Does that sound about right? Or whatever numbers you want to use based on whatever you think it's going to be. But now all of a sudden spending $2,500 to $3,000 out of $50,000, which they just said, and you've been talking about, does not sound like very much money. And that's how you can use anchoring to get them to feel comfortable with that number that you want to steer them to.
It's also good. And that's why I knew we had to have you on our podcast. And I know you could and probably would definitely go for hours and hours talking about this and why you have what you talked about with your course. And sadly, our time is coming to an end, but I wanted to give you the opportunity, if there's any other things you want to say before we give you an opportunity to kind of share what's next, how to, get on your workshops, things like that. Is there anything else that you're dying to get out there before we get onto that part?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. One of the things that I always like to leave people with, especially if we're talking about sales and booking more couples and charging more, which everybody wants to do, right? Work less, make more. That means you got to increase your average sale. A lot of people get fixated on the price itself, on the number. And I always like to use this metaphor. Hopefully, it'll land with both of you and also with everybody who's listening. Which is that let's just say in this analogy, you wanted to lose weight. Okay, like I'd like to lose weight. I think everybody would like to be a little bit healthier. And so let's say that you wanted to lose weight, and eventually at the end of it, the scale is going to tell you whether or not you hit your goal. Okay, just like the price is going to tell you whether or not you were able to charge more for your services. Now, if you wanted to lose weight, would you obsess about the scale that you were stepping on? Would you look at that scale and go, you know what, I'm gonna do everything I can to learn about scales. I'm gonna do everything. I'm gonna, like, should it be digital or analog? If I step on the scale and I don't see the number that I like, am I gonna get pissed off at the scale or blame the scale? Is my doctor gonna tell me that the reason why I'm not reaching my goals is because the scale doesn't work very well? But that's what wedding pros do, right? Where they go through and they're like, oh, I think my scale's broken. I think my pricing doesn't work. In reality, if you want to lose weight, if you want to hit that goal, that number that's on the scale, you can do one of two things. You can either move more or eat less, or some combination of both. So the number that you see on the scale is a reflection of how much work you did on those activities. How much did you move? How clean did you eat? Now, in the metaphor, bring it back to videographers, to filmmakers, instead of focusing on pricing so much, which is really just a byproduct of all the activities that you do in the sales process, the two things that you want to focus on is how can you provide more value and how can you offer more reassurance that you are the best bet in the group. So just like you got to focus on moving more and eating cleaner, you got to focus on building value and providing reassurance. When you do those two things, when you focus on those two activities, head down, obsessing about how to build value, how to provide reassurance, eventually the byproduct of that will be higher prices. It's not going to happen if you don't do those two things. Just like you'll never reach the number that you want, no matter what kind of scale you use, if you sit around drinking wine and eating chicken wings, binging on Netflix all day. So for you videographers out there, get off the couch, stop thinking that the scale is going to fix everything, and focus instead on how can you build value based on your buyer's biggest desires.
Incredible.
I'm glad I asked that question. I was just going to tell him to where can we find him? But I'm glad I asked that. No, that's huge. That's so true. I think so many of us are just staring at the scale like, why aren't you working? Like I said, I told you how much I want to weigh. Like, why don't I weigh that much? And it's like you don't start, it's that slow, steady process of changing the way you think about the entire experience. All of this is so good. I know this is going to be one of those episodes that people continue to go back and back and back. We'll have to have you on again. But where can people find you? What do you have going on? I know you mentioned when we talked before that you have maybe some workshops, some things like that. What's the best place and way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, easiest way is to go on our Facebook group, which is Sell Weddings Like a Pro. We're fairly active in there. So hit us up. Super easy to get some free content in there. We do morning lives pretty regularly. We do free live workshops in there. There are a lot of downloads and templates and things like that. My wife always says, Sam, you give away too much stuff for free. So we do. We give a lot away for free. So it's kind of all collected in there. Another great place to find us, obviously on Instagram, but really, I'm kind of found my little home on Clubhouse. It's a cool spot. It's all content. It's a great opportunity for people to ask questions. And I typically do most of the shows by myself and really treat it like an Ask Me Anything, where I'll spend, 20, 30, 40 minutes talking about a topic, a deep dive in the sales process. And then I'll take questions from the audience. And, from what I've heard and from what both of you two have experienced, and maybe some of the listeners now, is that just the free stuff that I'm giving away on Clubhouse and in Facebook is resulting in bookings, like solid takeaways in your bank account. And so I always recommend starting with the free stuff. And as I always tell my wife, babe, if they like the free stuff, wait till they experience the stuff that you got to buy, because it's that much better.
Love it. Love it. All good things. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, the hour to be on here. We'll link all those things in the show notes, of course, so people can find them really easily. But we really appreciate it. Our goal with How to Film Weddings is to elevate the industry, and you have done just that today. So thank you so much.
Yeah, very welcome. Thanks, guys, for having me on. Appreciate it.
Well, Sam, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast this week. So incredible. Mind has been blown. I can't wait to start the process of figuring out how I'm going to implement the things that you told me to do in this episode. But the first thing I'm going to do, John, right now, so that I can do that, is head over to Sam's Facebook group called Sell Weddings Like a Pro. And if you're not in there, go ahead and head over there right now. He's doing a bunch of free workshops and stuff that you can learn from. Check him out on Clubhouse. John, it has been great to hang out with you. And until next time, we'll see ya.
See you guys. Are you looking for a better way to deliver your wedding films to your couples? Look no further. Our friends over at WedFlow provide the most flexible video delivery solution on the market. WedFlow is pay per project with no large upfront cost or commitment, and you can cancel anytime. Not only that, WedFlow offers a premium viewing experience for your couples, accessible on mobile, tablet, desktop, as well as their very own suite of TV apps. Each project comes with 10 years hosting and an experience for your clients that will blow them away. Stop delivering your films the old-fashioned way and give your couples something to rave about. Head on over to howtofilmweddings.com/WedFlow to check out WedFlow today.